Hi Darcy.
Ash, good afternoon. Lovely to see you again, and thank you for welcoming me on your podcast.
And welcome you, the audience, to the debate and discussion podcast on the YouTube channel LaGrua Productions. Today I've got my friend James Darcy Fordham here as a guest, and we're here to discuss the Edwardian era. I've got some information on the Edwardian era for any of you who might not know much about it. This is from Wikipedia. The Edwardian era, or Edwardian period of British history, spanned the reign of King Edward VII from 1901 to 1910, and is sometimes expanded to the start of the First World War. The death of Queen Victoria in January 1901 marked the end of the Victorian era. Her son and successor, Edward VII, was already the leader of a fashionable elite that set a style influenced by the art and fashions of continental Europe. Samuel Hines described the Edwardian era as a leisurely time when women wore picture hats and did not vote, when the rich were not ashamed to live conspicuously, and the sun really never set on the British flag. So that's some of the information on the Edwardian era from Wikipedia, which before James arrived at my humble home, I did a bit of research and looked into that, and also got some images. But shortly after I did that, James looked into some things, didn't you, James?
Yeah, there's some the Edwardian era is a very interesting time, as are all parts of history, but nonetheless, some quite interesting facts. So, in 1901, obviously the most significant part of the Edwardian era was that Edward VII became king. Another little interesting fact, the first wireless transmission was made across the Atlantic from Cornwall to Canada.
First wireless
transmission via radio. So
via radio.
So that's an interesting
from
fact.
Cornwall.
Yeah, from Cornwall to Canada.
From Cornwall to Canada, that's fascinating.
That's quite an interesting little fact. Then in 1902, Britain won the Boer War with Africa. And the first Marmite factory was established in Burton-upon-Trent.
In Burton-upon-Trent, the first Marmite. And what period was that?
Edwardian, yeah, so 1902.
1902, yeah. That was 1902.
And then in 1903, had the first ever Liberal Labour pact, coalition between the two parties. The Liberals are being effectively what are now the Liberal Democrats. And the Women's Social and Political Union was formed by 6 women, including Emmeline and Christabel Pankhurst. So that was the obviously the start of the movement which brought about the women's right to vote. That was in 1903.
That was the women's liberation movement.
That's right.
Yeah, it was. Did we get? I don't suppose we managed to get a name for that period. I know there was there was a lady who forefronted the women's liberation movement, and that was
Emmeline Pankhurst. Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah,
and she was one of the 6 women that actually founded this.
Yeah.
Women's Social and Political Union.
Yeah. Because they were advocating for more rights given to the women, weren't they? More freedoms, more liberties,
and eventually, of course, the vote. So that was interesting time politically. Yeah. And then Peter Pan was published in 1904. by J.M. Barnes.
Yeah.
In 1906, the Liberals won the general election. And in Manchester, Charles Stuart Rolls and Sir Frederick Henry Royce form what is now known as Rolls-Royce in Manchester.
Rolls-Royce,
in 1906.
1906, yeah.
In 1908, the old age pension became enacted in law through Parliament in 1908. So that's when it's not called the old age pension anymore, but that's when it started in 1908.
So it almost seems like during that period, you know, certain rights and liberties and certain things like the women's liberation movement and also the pension, it's that even at this late date, you know, the start of the 20th century, it's remarkable that they only just conjured up the idea of having a pension, you know.
It's a great time of social reform.
It must have been a period of a lot of social changes.
Absolutely.
That gave people more security or rights.
Indeed.
Yeah, fascinating. You'd think that they would have, like, I mean, you had the Industrial Revolution not long before the Edwardian era, didn't you? Yeah. So there was like, but you'd think that the pension would have been enacted early. I would have thought that it would have been enacted earlier than that, you know, because people had been working for a long time before that. Indeed. And what had they been working for, you know, if they weren't secured with their pension?
Yeah.
It's like, it takes a long time, doesn't it, for reforms to happen gradually throughout history.
And arguably, most of the greatest reforms did take part in the Edwardian period. Yeah. And in the last 100 years, of course. And going back to, we had our first Prime Minister, Sir Robert Walpole, and that was in the Georgian period, which is what we talked about last week. So, in 150 years of politics it took to bring about the old age pension. The American Samuel Franklin Cody makes the first powered flight in the UK. That's an interesting one. And then in the following year, American Harry Selfridge opened Selfridges in Oxford Street. That was in 1909.
Yeah.
And going back to the previous point about first powered flight, Frenchman Louis Blériot flies across the English Channel for the first time.
Wow, so there's a lot of expedition things going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got one more little fact there, 1910.
Yeah, and of course then, sadly, Edward VII passes in 1910, and then that's when George V becomes king.
And that marked the start of the Georgian period?
Well, the second Georgian period.
Yeah, second, I see.
Yeah, that was when George V became king in 1910, yeah.
Oh, I see, yeah. But it was the second Georgian period. There was a Georgian period before the Edwardian period.
There was indeed, yeah. Actually it was Victorian before Edwardian and then Georgian before that.
So it goes Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian. Is there any way that the audience can is there any way of remembering that? So it goes Georgian, goes Victorian, goes Edwardian.
Yeah, and then we go back to another George becoming king. George V was the infamous king that had the stutter. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And they did
and there was the madness of King George, wasn't there?
Same. And Colin Firth played him in the film The King's Speech.
Yeah. Well, we've also got a photo of King Edward the 7th. there. Very statuesque looking character in his lovely robes. Do you think that robe would be quite heavy, Darcy, if you were wearing
Oh gosh, yeah, very,
that heavy,
yeah.
quite heavy?
Absolutely.
And just to round us off, we've got a photo of some clothing from the Edwardian period, an example of clothing that would be normally worn during the Edwardian period.
And we've got some music, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got some music. We've got an image of Sir Henry Wood, a composer from the Edwardian period, and we'll just play some music from.
Must think that away. I'm sure.
This track is called William Tell Overture. It's composed by Giugiani Rossini, Sir Henry Wood, and the New Queen's Hall Orchestra. So that was William Tell Overture by Sir Henry Wood. You've been watching LaGrua Productions on my YouTube channel. Have a good evening.